Week 5 is in the books, so that means it's time to hit those waiver wires to find players that could add value to the back end of your rosters. And first and foremost, I want to highlight a couple of players that are very highly rostered already, but not exactly 100% that I think need to be. And that includes Andy Dalton, quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, Joe Flacco, quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, Kareem Hunt and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, Isaac Guerrero, running back for the San Francisco 49ers, Darius Slayton, wide receiver for the New York Giants, and Allen Lazard, wide receiver for the New York Jets. Again, all these guys are rostered in over 90% of Dynasty leagues out there, but not exactly 100%, so double check your waiver wires and immediately add these guys if they are available. All right, to kick things off at running back, we have the guy who has actually become the better fantasy backup in Houston with Joe Mixon out, in Dare Ogunbowale, who just had actually a tremendous game this week with 87 total yards on 21 total touches for 14.7 PPR fantasy points without even scoring a touchdown. Now, the unfortunate part with adding Ogunbowale now is that Joe Mixon is likely to be back next week off of his injury, so Dare is just going to go back to being a fantasy handcuff and largely irrelevant for your starting lineup. But I still think that he's worth a stash just in case Mixon were to ever get hurt again this year, because over the past 2 weeks, I think Ogunbowale has shown enough to be considered the actual handcuff to Joe Mixon, not Cam Akers. Speaking of handcuff running backs, this one is a projection of future handcuff duties in Jacksonville with D'Ernest Johnson. Travis Etienne has largely looked horrible all season and has been outshined and outproduced by Tank Bigsby in almost every single week, it seems. And now it's actually gotten to the point that Etienne has been rumored to be a possible trade option for Jacksonville before the trade deadline this year to get out of paying his fifth-year option next year and save them some money. So if that actually happens and Etienne does get traded somewhere, Bigsby would then be the starter, and then D'Ernest Johnson would then be the handcuff in case Tank Bigsby got hurt. Now, Johnson hasn't actually had the chance to be the starter in Jacksonville yet, but in Cleveland, he did get 2 starts with Nick Chubb hurt, and in those 2 games, he rushed for 99 yards and another 58 receiving yards in one game, and 146 yards and a touchdown in the other. He's not a bad running back. He's a very solid backup that we just really haven't seen get usage since those 2 games back in 2021, but it's possible that D'Ernest Johnson could see a start later in the year, so he's worth the free add and stash right now because no one's going to be looking at him, and he's very widely available, so add him for free if you have the extra bench spots. At the wide receiver position now, we had an absolute banger of a game on Thursday night, and from that game, Ray McCloud had 6 catches for 66 yards on 9 targets. Now, 9 targets sounds great and all, but in a game where Kirk Cousins threw 58 times, that is only a 15% target share, but 15% isn't bad if you're getting that off of waiver wires. And this isn't McLeod's first productive game this year. He's had 2 other games with 9+ PPR fantasy points, 50+ receiving yards, including last week in week 4 when he caught 6 passes for 52 yards on 7 targets. The Falcons receiver room has very clearly become Drake London and Darnell Mooney as the top targets, but McLeod has also solidified himself as the team's wide receiver 3 with Rondale Moore hurt and possible even 3rd option on the team depending on what Kyle Pitts is doing any given week. And given his recent production and how often Atlanta is now throwing, McLeod is actually not a terrible flex option in your start 10, start 11, or more kind of starter leagues. And should anything happen to Drake London or Darnell Mooney, McLeod's role would increase even more to a possible fantasy wide receiver 3 or better. He just should not be available in over 30% of Dynasty leagues right now and needs to be added this week. All right. Also at wide receiver, just to reiterate names from last week because they haven't played yet at the time this video posts, but with Rashee Rice now on injured reserve and out for a minimum of 4 games, maybe even more depending on an actual diagnosis that we're still waiting on, any and all Chiefs wide receivers behind Xavier Worthy are fair game to be added. Justin Watson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore, they all have some possibility of relevance with Rashee Rice out. Now, who has the best chance out of that group or who actually becomes the most relevant? I really have no idea. My personal bet is on Watson, but that doesn't mean that the others aren't fine pickups either. So since they play Monday night, and if you're watching this before the game, they can still be added if you have an extra bench spot, or if you can cut some random free agent you still have, like A.T. Perry now after he was cut a couple days ago, Desmond Ridder, Michael Thomas, Terrace Marshall, Irv Smith, Isaiah Spiller, Chase Claypool, anyone like that who is an actual NFL free agent should be cut now in favor of a guy who's actually on a team and playing tonight just to see what happens. And finally, just to package together two other names that I've mentioned previously in this video this year are Ryan Tannehill, who is still a free agent, and Brenton Strange, the current backup tight end, who is still decently producing with Evan Ingram out. So both of these guys are available still in anywhere from 15 to 60% of MFL leagues. So if either of these guys are available in your league, I think they also make great stashes if you have extra room from moving guys to injured reserve or trading anybody or just anything like that. Add these guys if they are still available.